Emily?
Hi, is this Paul?
Yes, it is.
Hi, thanks for calling.
No
Can you
problem.
hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, great. Now, assuming it's okay with you, I do record my interviews.
Yeah, absolutely, that's fine.
Okay, hold on just a second. Let me get this recording up. Okay. So thanks for talking with me. Like I think I told you in the email, I'm doing a story about sort of rape in the media and looking at the men's rights movement
Okay.
and the discussion of all that. So I was hoping you could tell me, first of all, tell me just a little bit about how you got involved in the men's rights movement.
Well, my interest in it first developed over a 20-year career as a counselor in the addictions field. I
Uh-huh.
noticed sometime in the late 80s there was a turn in the philosophy and treatment. There was a lot of more I would call political indoctrination going on of clinicians leaning toward the feminist mindset, and I saw some very negative consequences from that and did some investigating and ended up with a bit of a different worldview about the politics about and between men and women, and
Mm-hmm.
have been doing this ever since.
Okay. And no, did you found A Voice for Men?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And what year did you found it?
2009 officially.
Okay. And do you remember when you first started hearing the term men's rights movement?
Um, Yeah, it was about 2008. Um,
Okay.
uh, I didn't really have verbiage for the idea of a movement myself. More accurately, probably 2007. I came on as editor in chief of Men's News Daily .com, which at the time was sort of the flagship of this perspective, these kind of issues. But I actually got into it in an online world where I had not actually heard the term men's rights movement until then.
Uh-huh.
I was just
And tell me
interested
about,
in writing about men's issues.
okay. And so A Voice for Men, do you keep track of your readership? Do you know how big it is and how it's grown over the years?
Um, well, we track as much as we're able to using the metrics that are available now for measuring audience size and demographics, none of which are hugely reliable in most people's opinions, but we are ranked around 35,000 on Alexa. We estimate we have about 10 to 12,000 unique visitors a day.
Mm-hmm. And how is that? Do you know what that was like when you first started?
Oh, it's many times busier than when we first
Mm-hmm.
started. I started A Voice for Men as a personal blog, and
Uh-huh.
I remember being excited one day when I had 100 visitors to the site. Uh,
Uh-huh.
so yeah, it's grown quite a bit, and as a matter of fact, with the exception of one website that I can think of, which has 600 million in Gawker media money behind it, we are out trafficking and outpacing in growth every significant feminist website that I can think of.
So that would be, what is that, Jezebel?
Jezebel would be the one with the Gawker media money behind it.
Uh-huh.
But when it comes
Uh-huh.
to the icons of feminism online, so to speak, you have sites like Jezebel, not Jezebel, feministing.com, Jessica Valenti's site.
Uh-huh.
You have feminist.com, a
Mm-hmm.
couple of others, but we left them behind in traffic a long time ago, over a year ago.
Uh-huh. And so generally speaking, do you feel like it seems like the men's rights movement has grown? Is that what you think? And do you have any sort of examples of how it's grown besides the traffic to your website?
Well, certainly media attention. If
Yeah.
that is any kind of metric, then I would say that it's grown. I know that A Voice for Men, which is widely regarded as the flagship of the men's movement online, has grown from myself writing a personal blog to an operation with more than 25 volunteers that work at it, do very dedicated work, uh, editing and all sorts of other functions, the radio shows. Uh, we're setting up a conference in June in Detroit that's happening. There's a lot going on, and the individual activism that we have done for men that we feel like have been mistreated by our criminal justice and family court systems.
Mhm. How do you know how big the conference in Detroit is going to be?
It's hard to measure. We haven't put tickets on sale yet. We're hoping for 300 to 500 in attendance, and I think that's reasonable given the lineup of people that we have ranges from Dr. Warren Farrell to Senator Ann Cools, some very noted and esteemed academicians, and some very prominent figures within the men's rights movement.
Uh-huh. What are you going to talk about?
The idea is to cover a large spectrum of issues faced by men and boys individually by people in their areas of expertise. We have Barbara Kay with the National Post coming. We are anticipating she will be talking about the anti-male bias in the media.
Mm-hmm.
We will have Miles Groth speaking about the experiences of young men in education. Dr. Warren Farrell will be talking about the problems faced by boys in our society. I'll be talking
Mm-hmm.
about activism. Karen Strawn, a very popular figure in our community, will be talking about says the negative impacts of feminism in this culture, which there are quite a few.
And so how many women are involved in the movement? Like, do you have any idea of what percent of people that are involved are women?
I'd say the percentage of our writers on at A Voice for Men, and again, when there's sort of two questions there for me. One is the movement itself, which is certainly larger than ABFM, and
Right.
so I would need to clarify that most of my answers are going to be contained to my world, which is ABFM.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it is regarded as, I think, iconic of the movement at this point in time. Probably 35–40% of our most read feature writers are female. We have, I think, 5 out of 12. I can't guarantee you this exactly, but I'm pretty sure it's 5 out of 12 on senior staff are female.
Uh-huh.
One of our radio programs on our internet radio platform has an all-female pool to the talent there called Honey Badger Radio. We have significant female presence, and it's growing.
What do you think attracts women to the movement?
Well, I think one to really answer that, I've got to clear up a misperception that often comes with and understandably with a term like men's rights movement. This is not a men against women situation in terms of certainly in terms of membership and perspective. There are a lot of women in our culture that feel like there is a lot of things going wrong for men and boys. These are women with sons and with fathers and with brothers and with husbands and boyfriends that have experienced problems that they feel like are unfair. these are just like in any other, I think, social movement you will find. It does attract people who are more interested in issues than genitalia, if you'll pardon the expression.
Mm-hmm.
We have women attracted to this because we're identifying problems that are under-identified and under-recognized in this culture and trying to bring attention to them. You don't have to, if you have a mother whose son was kicked out of college, as it happened with Judith Grossman, who was a lifelong feminist, her son was kicked out of college because he was accused of a sexual assault that was never proven to have happened, and no evidence was ever none other than the accusation was brought against him. And it damaged his college career. And this is happening to a lot of young men on campuses because, unfortunately, we have reduced our standard of evidence through the Obama administration's Dear Colleague letter. Let me expand on that a little bit more. We're not a partisan organization. We're equally brutal on conservatives because we see this problem, this discrimination against men and boys, is one that does not have a political party affiliation, so we don't either.
So tell me about, you're talking about that there's a lower standard for evidence these days on college campuses, and why was that? I didn't catch the part because of
April of 2011, the Obama administration issued what has come to be called the Dear Colleague letter, and it was a directive to universities that they were to drop the age-old standard of it when it came to allegations of sexual assault or really any kind of inappropriate sexual conduct on campus. They were to drop the standard of clear and convincing evidence required to take administrative action against students and change that to preponderance of the evidence. And if it were that simple, I would still not favor it, but it isn't that simple. They also, in their standards for this, they have removed the accused student's ability to have legal counsel, to question the accuser, to face them at a hearing. And so what it amounts to is that if a young man is accused of a sexual assault on campus, he can be taken in front of a tribunal, which I believe are operated more like star chambers. And he is faced with the charges. He is not allowed anything that we normally think of in terms of due process. And then if it is decided that he is a little bit less credible than his accuser, then he can be expelled from college or university. And this has happened many times. One great example of this is a young man at the University of North Dakota last year named Caleb Warner. Year after last now. He was accused of sexually assaulting a young woman on campus. The administration found him guilty by the Dear Colleague standards, kicked him out of a university, ruined his academic career. Meanwhile, the young woman who filed a report against him also filed one with the local police department. They investigated the allegation, found that she was not only, there was no supporting evidence, but in fact they found that she was lying and had filed a report. They issued a warrant for her arrest. She fled the state to avoid being arrested for filing a false police report. Caleb Warner took that to the university, and they still refused to reverse the decision on him. And it took him 3 years and 2 years and tens of thousands of dollars in order to finally get the university to clear his name. And by the time he was done with that, he was broke. He's driving a delivery truck in North Dakota now with no plans to go back to school. And he's not by any means the only example. Now, I'm sure it's obligatory. I wish it weren't, but it is. This is not to say that sexual assault is not a serious problem. It's not to say that we should not take it seriously. But often people conflate the idea that if we're concerned about false allegations and we're concerned about due process, we have been accused of being rape apologists and pro-rape supporters. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's difficult to defend against that because it's simply another pointed finger, but I just wanted to toss that in there. We don't support sexual assault of anybody, but the problem of false allegation and due process is significant and serious on our college campuses, and we try to bring attention to that.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think would be the best thing for colleges to do in terms of handling alleged rapes?
I think alleged rapes are a criminal matter that need law enforcement intervention. I don't think that putting students in charge of tribunals with no legal training that actually are determining the academic fate of somebody based on what amounts to a criminal accusation is appropriate at all. Sexual assault is a crime for good reason. And when it happens, it should be reported to the police. If the police do an investigation and find that there's evidence to warrant it, they should make an arrest. A prosecutor should look at the case to determine whether or not to proceed. And if a conviction is obtained, then we have somebody to rightfully put in jail. But to turn this into an administrative action by untrained people at the expense of individual liberties and of people's academic futures, I think is unconscionable.
So what do you think, both on college campuses and off, what do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions that people have about rape?
Well, one of the biggest misconceptions is that only women are victims. If we look globally at the problem of rape, we actually find that counting prison populations, if we are going to stoop down and acknowledge that inmates are human beings, which I certainly do, that we have more men raped in this culture than we do women. We also have a problem acknowledging that coerced sex, forced sex happens to men from females. That it is actually a thing that happens. We have a problem, I think, with feminist hyperinflating rape statistics, creating a kind of hysteria on campus over a problem that needs due attention from law enforcement. And that certainly that awareness of all kinds of crime is a really, really good thing to happen. But we've turned rape into a political issue and a kind of a slogan for young college politicos. And I think we've diminished its significance in people's minds that way. And I don't think that helps anything. I think the biggest problem is asking people to step back, to do what feminism has been calling people to do for 50 years, and to take gender for a moment out of the equation, look at raw statistics, look at raw numbers, look at who's being harmed and by whom, and try to find real solutions. Slogans don't do that. Certainly star chambers don't do that. Removing due process does not do that. And hyperbole doesn't do that. I think everybody acknowledges that rape is a horrific crime, and it's a serious problem. At the same time, we don't have to inflate it as a problem. We don't have to turn it into a political issue where now, I'll give you an example. In Hamilton College, and this is not the only one, this is a school in Canada. A professor there named Keith Edwards does a class called She Fears You. And
Sorry, say that again, a class called what?
She Fears You.
She Fears You.
She Fears You.
Okay.
And at that school, every new orientee, male orientee, is taken into an auditorium, told that they live in a rape culture and that masculinity is the problem, which is, uh, I, I don't even have words to describe the stupidity behind that idea. Masculinity in its nature is much more likely to protect women than harm them, and always has been. I think that's a canard that's damaging. But back to the point, all these young men are marched into colleges and universities on orientation and told that rape is an epidemic, that women are being raped everywhere. It's because of men, that rape itself is defined as female victim and male perpetrator, that men can't be sexually assaulted, and that the fundamental core of the problem is masculinity itself. And this is where the ideologues come in and say, for us to end rape culture, then masculinity has to change. There's no science to bear this out. There is, I don't even think, common sense to bear this out. I don't think it holds up under the weight of honest scholarly pursuit or investigation. Yet it has become a standard in many colleges to promote the idea that men need to be fixed. I think this is a very damaging message for our young men going to college. I hope that answers your question.
Now, I mean, I've looked at different, college websites where they have, the sexual assault, websites about, how to report sexual assault and so on, or offices to help students deal with it. And most of them do mention, or many of them at least do mention, men being, victims of sexual assault. Do you think that they don't mean it, or that men are somehow shamed into not reporting it? Or do you think it's not mentioned enough?
I wish I felt differently, but I think that's lip service. When you have at the same time on the same colleges campaigns that say only men can stop rape and men can stop rape, the idea that the tacit acknowledgement that yes, a few times in certain circumstances men can be victims. I think it's lip service. I think another problem that I didn't touch on a moment ago that I think does need to be addressed is that there is now and I think it's born out of some of the histrionics of this, a wide push to legitimize the idea that if somebody's had a couple of drinks or any alcohol, I mean, and that's the problem, there's no measurable factor here. There's no way to nobody's established a blood alcohol level, but that intoxicated sex is rape. And this is being popularized everywhere. The fact of the matter is that a lot of sex is intoxicated, especially on college campuses. These are young people in party days. This sort of things happened. But to say that if a couple goes out and has a few beers and then has sex, then that means that the woman was raped when the man was just as intoxicated is absolutely insane.
What do you think would be a more sensible standard? Do you think, like, if the woman, like, unconsciousness, what would be your standard?
I think personal accountability is a standard that would be helpful. One, I don't have one answer of a single standard that I think is going to fix this problem, nor do I think the problem is ever going to be fixed. There's always going to be criminals in the world. There will always be rapists. There will always be people that commit sexual assault of both sexes. However, some of the things that we can do to ameliorate, we're doing just the opposite. We are teaching people that any notion of the idea that people have responsibility for going out into a room full of strangers and getting plastered, which we know increases the likelihood of a wide litany of things going wrong in their lives. That if we say that we're victim blaming, and I reject that out of hand. That's not victim blaming. It's asking people to exercise common sense. But the normal consensus especially within the feminist community, is that don't talk to me about what I'm wearing, and I agree with that. And I know for a fact that there's no research at all anywhere that supports the idea that rape victims are selected based on their attire. That's a legitimate statement. Don't talk to, if we're talking about women who are sexually assaulted, don't talk to them about their dress, because their dress doesn't have any bearing on it. But being intoxicated with strangers does increase. Alcohol increases the chances of rapes happening. It is not victim blaming to advise young women to stay sober with strangers. Yet we live in a culture that demands that we never say anything like that. And I think that mentality is causing more rapes, not preventing them.
And so I think, I think this is probably the sort of gray area where we do have the most debate. And you think, and so, if the feminist community is saying, they're over here going, it doesn't matter how drunk she was, it doesn't matter what she did, she has no personal responsibility. What is the consensus of the men's rights movement?
Well, in the end analysis, it doesn't matter how drunk somebody is or how many foolish choices they make. The culpability is still with the person that raped them. Nobody's denying that ultimately the culpability is with the bad actor. I certainly believe that, and I don't know anyone, including the men and women at A Voice for Men, that feel any differently than that. But on the other hand, that's not what we're saying. When we're saying, look, right, it's ultimately if somebody breaks into your home because you left the door unlocked, that doesn't mean it's your fault that you got robbed. Everybody knows that. That's common sense.
Right.
But an insurance company that finds out that you didn't lock your home won't pay you because they'll call it negligence. We think there needs to be some of this same mentality. I believe if women are concerned about being raped, I believe in the idea of self-protection, of carrying self-protection.
Like a gun or pepper spray or?
Whatever according to state laws is legal and that people are willing to be accountable to use responsibly. I think people should have a right to protect themselves. And I think that we all ultimately have an obligation to at least do our best to protect ourselves. That's why we lock our homes and get security alarms and lock our cars and don't go into strange neighborhoods at night while we're intoxicated, is because these are common sense measures for self-protection. I'm not just going to reduce this argument to carry a gun versus don't carry a gun. There's a wide range of choices that people can make to take care of themselves. My experience with the feminist community is that the moment you talk about any of those things, they are immediate to shriek at you that you're blaming the victim and that you're supporting rape culture. That's insane, in my opinion, to have that kind of mentality. And I believe, honestly, in my heart, that it puts women at risk.
And so, I know I keep coming back to the college drinking rape thing, because I
Sure.
think this is probably the crux of the issue when it comes to college campuses. So, so you think both, parties have a couple of beers and that's totally reasonable. What about, what do you think should be the criminal standard in terms of drunkenness and rape, whether for a female perpetrator or a male perpetrator? What should be done if a woman says I was, unconscious and woke up and a man was having sex with me, or a man says that? What is that?
Well, I think
what's the correct action to take there?
As a society, we have a responsibility to do our best, and admittedly it's a very difficult job, but we need to do our best to define informed consent as it relates to alcohol. Of course, it's a no-brainer. If somebody's passed out on the sofa and you have sex with them, it's rape. Most sane people, I don't think, would question that. If somebody's almost to the point of passing out, they're in a stupor and they're stumbling around, and you have sex with them, my opinion, that's rape.
Mm-hmm.
We get into a gray area when somebody is disinhibited because of alcohol. And that's one of the effects
Uh-huh.
of, I was an addictions counselor for 20 years. One of the primary effects of alcohol is disinhibition. People drink it so they feel comfortable, more comfortable about having sex. They make the decision to drink because they know they're going to have sex. So what does the question become at that point? Is somebody disinhibited uh, because they chose to get that way so that they felt more comfortable with having sex? Or are they disinhibited unintentionally and can't make a sound decision? These are probably questions that need to be answered by smarter people than me. But
Mm-hmm.
for the record, I want to say that what we need in this culture is a standard, something we can go by to establish informed consent. When is a person able to make informed consent, and when are they not? Certainly, like I said, somebody half passed out or passed out on a couch can't give informed consent. But somebody that's had a couple of glasses of wine, uh, I can't buy the argument that that's a rape. I just can't. Yet it is being interpreted, at least in the minds of a lot of gender ideologues, as a rape. And that is opening us up to a lot of very, very unfair legal persecution in this society.
Mm-hmm. And so I know you'd written on the website, you'd written about the Occidental online reporting
Yes.
form. Now, were you in charge of that? Or was that a different group that had done that initially?
Well, ultimately, everything on A Voice for Men is something where the buck stops with me.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's on A Voice for Men, I'm responsible for it. So if there's any questions along those lines in terms of what A Voice for Men has done, I'll be happy to answer them.
Right. My question was, did you orchestrate the initial spamming of the form back in, what was that, December, or was that something you were writing about later after it happened?
I wrote about it later after it happened.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Did not orchestrate it. I support it though.
Uh-huh.
I think that online form is an abomination
Mm-hmm.
in the way that it's presented. It invites people to make anonymous false accusations that, according to the form itself, will result in people being taken into the school administrator's office and quote unquote reminded of sexual assault policy and told that serious consequences can come to those who violate that policy. That, to me, is a civil liberties matter, and that, to me, is a due process matter. If schools are going to take it upon themselves to take criminal accusations and take any kind of action on them whatsoever, they need to show at least some respect for the standards of due process that we've lived by in this culture. And to take somebody into an office, a young man, I can't imagine what it would feel like to go to school one day and be called to an administrator's office over something you know absolutely nothing about and be told you've been accused of rape. No, we can't tell you who accused you. No, we can't tell you what the nature of the problems are. We're just going to sit here and tell you about what kind of trouble you can get into. That's harassment. There's no other way to term that than harassment. I certainly understand the spirit of the idea because we know that a certain amount of sexual assaults are not reported. So I understand the spirit of trying to do what you can to increase the reporting of crimes. That's a no-brainer too. But to set up an instrument where accusations can be made against anybody with no accountability whatsoever from the person making the accusation, no weight of evidence, no standard of proof at all, and then to take administrative action and intervene on the life of a student with that is absolutely egregious, in my opinion, and I'm defiantly opposed to it.
And you'd said you'd mentioned numbers about rapes and sexual assaults being inflated. Was that in general, or was that just on college campuses?
That's in general. We can thank a scholar from the University of Arizona for that, Mary Koss, for a lot of it, and certainly I'm not going to put all the weight on her, but she is the one that has done the lion's share of work with the Centers for Disease Control. And the history behind that, as a matter of fact, there's been a video that is being produced this morning, that's coming out this morning, that I'll be happy to send you after our conversation, that demonstrates exactly what Koss did in her studies to arrive at her 1 in 4 women being raped on college campuses, and the methodological juggling that went on, and the nature of the questions that were asked, that incidentally, when the same questions are asked of men, it turns out 1 in 4 of them have been raped. There has been an inflating of the statistics. Sometimes I don't like the back and forth about the statistics. We know that rapes happen, just like we know that false accusations happen. And the problem is that whether one woman is raped or 10,000, or one man is falsely accused or 10,000, it certainly matters to the person that it happens to. So we can argue all day long about numbers, but I don't think it is intellectually honest to produce data like Mary Koss has, that asserts that 1 in 4 women will be raped in their collegiate career, when I think it was something like 74% of the women she questioned that she identified as rape victims said they weren't raped.
And so why do you think women make false rape reports?
The Eugene Kanan did a study, a couple of studies actually, and his analysis of the motivation was, see if I can remember all 3 of these. There's 3 primary motivations for false rape accusations. One is for revenge. A lot of times this happens during the process of contested divorces. There's allegations of sexual improprieties or rape that happen to get a leg up on that and to get revenge at somebody that you're angry about. Another one is to get as attention-seeking behavior. I think we have somewhere along the lines of 4 to 5% of the population is personality disordered, and this is the group of people that are prone to making false allegations of all kinds in order to seek attention and support and sympathy in their lives. And then we have people who do it to create an alibi. There are women, certainly, we're not even talking about Duke Lacrosse or the Hofstra case was a good one. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No.
Several years ago, 5 young men were accused of gang raping a girl in a men's bathroom in Hofstra University in New York. They were all arrested and thrown into jail, or they had arrested 4 of them. They were seeking the 5th one to put him in jail too. There was immediate rush to do everything they could to convict these guys, and then the last guy that they were looking for turned up with a cell phone that had videoed the sexual encounter, which was wholly and completely consensual. She made up the story because her boyfriend suspected she had been unfaithful when she had voluntarily gone in and had sex with several guys in the men's room. Alibis, I think, are one of the most common ones. Elizabeth Burney's another example. A man went to prison for 4 years, where he, ironically enough and tragically enough, was assaulted by other inmates when he was in prison. And the reason that she accused him of rape is that she got drunk, got in the car with him, left the establishment, and it angered her girlfriends, and she wanted something to tell them so that her girlfriends would not be angry at her, and a man ended up spending 4 years in prison for that. It is a fairly common problem. Nobody knows what the exact percentage of false allegations are. I've heard estimates from 2% to 40%, and some even higher. My reaction to that is that it doesn't matter. If it's 2%, that's a whole lot of false allegations. If it's 40, it's a whole lot more. But however many false allegations there are in this culture, the men who are affected by them are devastated. Their personal lives, their financial lives, scholastic, legal, every impact, their family lives, every element of their lives is negatively impacted by a false allegation. So that's another thing a Voice for Men does, is we try to draw attention to that problem. And the biggest part of that problem is that for the most part, false accusers face no real consequences from the criminal justice system. And that's something that needs to change.
And so, you know, I mean, obviously this has been getting more media attention, but, you know, I'm interested in knowing, is the men's rights movement, have you guys been talking about this more? Do you think there's been more of a concerted effort to raise awareness of what you consider, you know, these issues to be? Do you think?
Yeah. I think there certainly has. I think that the fact that we're having this conversation is some evidence of that. We have gotten a lot more mainstream attention. Some of it, admittedly, is just, you know, basic yellow journalism, hit pieces. We're all a bunch of neckbeards living in our mother's basements, supporting rape culture. And on top of that, we're all straight white males, which is also just categorically untrue. There is a change happening in the dialogue about this in the culture. That is, to me, the first indication that there is change coming. And this is the sort of thing, though, that's going to take generations for anything really substantial to happen, because, you know, we talk a lot about feminism, but feminism is not nearly the only problem. As a matter of fact, there are a lot of principles that feminists claim to espouse that many men's advocates are in complete agreement with. We are just equally critical of traditional culture, of the traditional male role as the designated protector and provider of society, of the burdens and expectations that are placed on men socially. These things are, for lack of a better word, part of feminist ideals, purportedly, or have been for 50 years. They're just not being realized. So we think there's some momentum there, but we do realize that we're up against human biology. The reason that feminism has been so wildly successful, and it has been, I mean, you can't argue that since the advent of gender feminism in the 1960s, that the women's movement has just done stunning things in that time. Part of that is because of the propensity in the human species for men to protect and provide for women and to give them what they perceive that they want. That's why feminism, I believe, has so many male allies. And it also explains why there's so much resistance to the idea of a men's rights issue. Men are not supposed to have needs. We're not supposed to have pain. We're not supposed to have struggles that we face as a class. That's not just in conflict with feminist ideology, that's in conflict with traditional views of men and masculinity. So we have a lot to overcome with that. But thankfully, there is a growing amount of men and women that are beginning to stand up and speak to these issues and to buck the biological programming and to buck the system and to buck feminism and everything else that we have out there today that still seeks to constrain men to a rather rigidly defined gender role. We got a long way to go? Absolutely, but we are making progress. I honestly believe that.
Okay. Gosh, is there anybody else that you think would be particularly good to talk to about this topic?
Absolutely. I think Karen Strong would be an excellent candidate to speak with.
Okay.
And I could certainly introduce you by email if you like.
That'd be great.
She is one of our contributing editors to A Voice for Men. She's not so closely aligned with us. She doesn't actually work for A Voice for Men. She's an occasional contributor. She does her own thing. She just got through speaking about feminism and men's issues at Ryerson University just a few days ago. I'll send you a link to the video of that. She gave a dynamite speech. She's a very, very articulate speaker and could probably bring you a lot. I can also recommend our managing editor, Dean Esme, as somebody to speak with who is very knowledgeable about the issues and I think would bring a lot to the table too.
Okay, great. And now you're based in Houston?
Yes, I live in Houston. Yes.
Okay, and is A Voice for Men, is that your main job or do you have another job?
It's what I do.
Okay. And can I just get you to spell your name for me so I make sure I have it right?
Sure. It's E as in Edward, L as in Larry, A as in Apple, M as in Mary.
Okay. And how old are you?
I've just turned 57 2 days ago.
57. Okay. And are you married, partnered?
Partnered, have a domestic partnership, I guess you would call it, with the same woman for 11 years.
Okay. Is she part of the movement?
No. As a matter of fact, not. She's retired from the financial industry. She is a big fan of me following this. She certainly is an in-spirit supporter, but she is not part of the movement. She's just a great partner.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you again for your time. If there's anything else that you think of that you want to mention, please just send me an email. And yeah, if you wouldn't mind introducing me to Karen Strong, I'd appreciate that.
Okay. Would you like to speak with Dean Esme as well?
Sure. Absolutely.
Okay. I'll get you hooked up with both of them by email.
Okay. Great. Thanks a lot.
All right. Enjoyed talking to you. Bye-bye.
Okay. You have a good one.